Today, we're delving into the mucky, viscous, candlelit world of a medieval village. You are a young girl about to face the most terrifying and unavoidable night of your life, your wedding night. Imagine yourself in a cramped, stuffy hut with a low, thatched roof. The air is thick, almost tangible, with the smells of damp wool, sour sweat, sputtering tallow candles, and the smoke from a hearth that never quite goes out. Outside, the village hums with conversation like a disturbed beehive, and you can't shake the feeling that everyone is talking about you. Your stomach is a tight knot as you adjust the scratchy linen shift, your finest garment, despite the rough patches at the elbows that scrape your skin. This isn't the fairy tale wedding of modern dreams. No, this is a grueling ordeal. You are likely about to endure several excruciatingly awkward moments that will haunt you for years, popping into your memory at the most inconvenient times. So dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a low background hum to simulate the wind in the fields, and let's ease into this journey together. You're standing in the heart of your village, a cluster of wattle and daub huts with mud-caked walls huddled together along a rutted track that has turned to slurry. It's late spring, and the cloying, almost sickly sweet scent of blooming hawthorn hangs in the air, though it's mercilessly undercut by the ever-present stench from the nearest dung heap, a permanent fixture of village life. Your wedding is tomorrow, and the village is already buzzing like a swarm of slightly drunk bees. As you haul a heavy bucket of water from the well, you catch snippets of talk. "She's marrying the miller's son. Lucky girl," one woman mutters, her face wizened and indifferent, while another scoffs. "Lucky, he's got a foul temper and a wandering eye, that one." You try to ignore them, but their words cling to your skirt like wet, soiled straw. This is not a private affair. Your wedding night is the village's premier entertainment, and you are the unwilling star of this cruel show. In medieval Europe, marriage was less about love and more about survival, alliances, land, and labor. Historians note that by the 13th century, the Catholic Church had tightened its grip on marriage, declaring it a sacrament. This meant your wedding wasn't just a party. It was a sacred, unbreakable contract before God. You aren't getting married for a shiny ring or pretty photos. You're tying your family's fate to another, and everyone from the priest to the village drunk is watching to see if you'll weaken the knot. Some villagers believe that a bride who stumbled on her way to the church was doomed to an unhappy life. So, you've been anxiously watching every loose stone in your path. Historians still debate whether this was a widespread superstition or just a local quirk, but you're not taking any chances. You pause at the well, the wooden bucket making your arms feel like lead, and catch your reflection in the dark water. Your face is flushed from the day's chores, milking the cow at dawn, kneading dough for the day's bread, and dodging your mother's endless prayer-like advice about wifely duties. The village is small, 200 souls at most, and privacy is a wild fantasy. You share a hut with your parents, 2 younger siblings, and one particularly cantankerous goat who has a habit of chewing on your straw mattress. The idea of intimacy on your wedding night feels like a cruel, vicious joke. You can hear the old women, their faces like baked apples, cackling as they shamelessly discuss the bedding ceremony. An invasive ritual where they'll escort you to the marriage bed amid a volley of bawdy, crude jokes. You are exhausted. You've been on your feet since before dawn, and the sun has only just dipped below the horizon. Your hands are rough and scratched from spinning wool. Your back aches from hauling firewood from the nearby woods. Yet the village expects you to be a blushing, innocent bride, radiant and ready for a night that holds more duty and dread than desire. You scoff, thinking how modern people would lose their minds if their wedding included a public inspection of the bedsheets the next morning. Spoiler alert, that's coming. You trudge back to your hut, water sloshing in the bucket. Your mother is already bustling about, piling you with more tasks before the big day, as if she's afraid you might relax for a single moment. She mutters about the dowry, a few chickens, a bolt of rough-spun cloth, and a wobbly stool your father carved. You don't know. This isn't some Game of Thrones-style union with golden knights. You are a peasant, and your marriage is a practical transaction to keep the village's web of mutual obligations intact. And yet, beneath the thick layer of nerves, a tiny ember of excitement glows. Perhaps this new life won't be as grim as the rumors suggest. But then you hear a neighbor shouting loudly about the groom's drinking, and your heart plummets into a cold void. Welcome to the medieval marriage game, where the stakes are high and the wine is watered down. You are back in the hut. The air is thick with the smell of boiled cabbage and sweat-soaked wool. The fire crackles weakly, casting dancing shadows on the rough clay walls. Sitting on a stool, you try to mend a tear in your shift, while your mother drones on about tomorrow's wedding. But your mind is elsewhere, on the fact that this marriage was decided when you had barely learned to chase chickens. You are not entering this union for grand passion. The deal was struck years ago, and you are only now feeling the full weight of its consequences. In the Middle Ages, betrothals were often arranged in childhood to secure alliances or property. By the 14th century, canon law required the consent of both parties at the altar, but let's be honest, saying no wasn't an option when your family's survival depended on this union. You're 16 or 17, and the miller's son was chosen because his family owns a strip of land that borders yours. This isn't love, it's logistics. Some betrothals involved a hand-fasting ritual where you'd seal the deal by clasping hands through a hole in a stone. You didn't have such a ceremony, but the weight of the agreement still presses on your chest like a tombstone. You put down your needle, your fingers aching from the sewing. Your younger sister is asleep on her pallet, oblivious to the storm in your head. She's lucky. She has a few more years. You are staring down the barrel of a life you did not choose. Your mother is still talking. Something about the miller's son being sturdy, which is medieval speak for not dead yet. You suppress a bitter laugh. If sturdy is the highest compliment, you're in for a thrilling marriage. You've barely spoken to him. He's a vague figure in your memory, hands dusted with flour and a mumbled greeting at the market. The hut door creaks open and your father enters, tracking in mud. He's been at the tavern, finalizing things with the groom's family, and his flushed face tells you it wasn't just a friendly chat. Betrothals like yours often involved tense negotiations. Land, tools, or even a pig could tip the scales. You're not just getting a husband, you're merging two households, and every detail has to be ironed out before the priest gets involved. You hear your father muttering about the miller's stinginess, and your stomach clenches. If they're already fighting, what will your wedding night be like? You're not naive. You know this night isn't about candles and soft words. It's about sealing the deal, and the village is waiting for proof. You step outside for a breath of air. The night is cool, the sky pricked with stars, but the village isn't sleeping. You can hear laughter from the tavern, a dog barking, the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer. This place is never truly quiet, and neither are your thoughts. You think of the whispers of brides who cried through their wedding nights, or worse, those who didn't survive childbirth a year later. You're not sure what's more terrifying, this one night or the lifetime that follows. At least if the groom gets drunk tomorrow, he might pass out before you have to deal with him. Your mother calls you back inside, her voice impatient. She's holding a comb, ready to attack the tangles in your hair as if that will magically make you a proper bride. You sit, wincing as she tugs, and try to focus on the firelight. The terms of your betrothal are set, a few coins and your labor as a wife. You're not just gaining a husband, you're losing what little freedom you had as a daughter. The church may call this a holy union, but to you, it feels like a contract written in someone else's hand. The fire in the hearth has burned down to a dull glow, and your mother's comb is still waging war on your hair. The air feels thick, not just with smoke, but with the weight of what's to come. At dawn, you're pulled into the next piece of this marital puzzle, the dowry. Your family has been haggling over it for weeks, and you feel less like a bride and more like a bundle of goods. In medieval Europe, the dowry was the bride's contribution to the marriage. Practical items, cloth, pots, livestock, and sometimes land or money. By the 13th century, it had become a cornerstone of marriage negotiations, especially for families like yours, where wealth was measured in an extra goat. Your dowry is unimpressive: a few chickens, a patchwork quilt, and that same wobbly stool. Your father boasts about it. Some dowries included bed rights, meaning your family promised the groom a share of a straw mattress in your home, a medieval luxury. Historians debate whether dowries gave women leverage or just turned them into bargaining chips. You're leaning toward the latter as your father yells at you to fold the linens faster. Each item is a piece of your old life being traded away. The chickens you fed since they were chicks. The quilt you helped your mother weave during the winter, when the cold made your fingers crack. You hear your father grumbling about their demand for an added bushel of barley. And you smirk. If they're this picky about grain, imagine how they'll judge your cooking. These negotiations are a power play, and you are the prize. Your mother, noticing you're distracted, shoves a small cast iron pot into your hands, another dowry item, and tells you to scrub it. You plunge it into a bucket of cold water, the chill biting at your knuckles. The village is stirring outside. The dowry negotiations aren't just about you, they're about maintaining the village's fragile balance. If your family gives too much, you'll go hungry in the winter. If they give too little, the miller might call off the wedding, leaving you an unmarried girl of 17, which is a virtual death sentence. You think of the groom. You've seen him at the mill, his face dusted with flour, but you don't know him. Is he kind? Cruel? Does he even want this marriage? Or is he, like you, just following his father's orders? The dowry makes you feel like an object, and you wonder if he feels the same. Maybe you should have bargained for a better groom instead of an extra chicken. Your father slams his hand on the table. He's furious. The miller's family wants a share of your family's meadow, the strip of land where you've always grazed your cow. You freeze. That meadow is your family's lifeline. You are not just bringing a dowry to this marriage. You are bringing your family's future. The village will talk if the deal falls through, and you'll be the girl who couldn't seal a contract. The wedding is tomorrow, and the dowry is still being fought over. Welcome to the medieval marriage market, where love is the last thing on anyone's mind. You're standing outside the hut. The morning sun does little to warm the damp air as your mother drags you toward a tub of warm water behind a flimsy screen of woven branches. The arguments over the dowry are still simmering, but today is the wedding, and there's no time for second thoughts. Your stomach is churning, not just from nerves, but from the meager porridge you ate at dawn. Now you're being scrubbed like a tarnished pot. This is the start of your wedding preparations, and they're less about pampering and more about making you presentable for the prying eyes of the village. In medieval Europe, a bride's preparation was a practical affair, especially for peasants. By the 14th century, a bride was expected to appear clean and modest, a reflection of her family's respectability. This isn't a spa day, it's a quick dunk and a borrowed dress. In some villages, it was believed that washing a bride's feet brought fertility. So your mother splashes water over your toes with alarming vigor. Historians debate whether this was a common custom or a local fancy, but you're too cold to care. Your mother hands you the dress, a hand-me-down from a cousin, dyed a faded blue. It's the best your family could manage, but it's itchy, the wool heavy and stiff. You pull it on, careful not to snag the loose threads, and catch your reflection in a polished copper plate. The girl staring back looks like a stranger. The village expects you to look the part, so you stand up straight, even though your bare feet are squelching in the mud. Your mother weaves a circlet of wildflowers into your hair, the stems scratching your scalp. She says it's to ward off evil spirits, but you suspect it's just to distract from the frayed hem of your dress. Your younger sister giggles, telling you that you look like a saint from the church fresco. If saints had to wear a dress this itchy, they'd have rebelled sooner. But her laughter is a small comfort. Your mother steps back, eyeing you like a merchant assessing a turnip, and hands you a pair of worn leather shoes, another dowry item. They pinch your toes, but you can't walk to the church barefoot. That's bad luck. Through the screen, you hear snippets of conversation. "She cleans up well," one man says, while a woman adds tartly, "I hope she's sturdier than she looks." You clench your fists. As you step out from behind the screen, your mother is already hissing instructions. Keep your head down, don't trip on the church steps, and for God's sake, don't argue with the priest. You nod, your thoughts on the groom. You haven't seen him today, and the uncertainty is gnawing at you. The preparations were meant to make you feel confident, but they only amplify your dread. Maybe if you'd scrubbed harder, you could have washed this whole wedding away. But as you follow your mother back to the hut, your dress trailing in the mud, the eyes of the village follow your every move. The church bells are ringing, and there's no turning back. You're trudging through the village. The scratchy blue dress clings to your legs as you follow your mother toward the field where the wedding feast is already descending into chaos. The church bells are still humming in your head, but they're being drowned out by roars of laughter, shouts, and the off-key wail of a fiddle. Your circlet of flowers has started to wilt. In medieval Europe, wedding feasts were a major community event, especially for peasants, part community bonding ritual, part excuse to eat something other than stale bread. By the 14th century, these feasts were often held outdoors, with everyone contributing food or ale. Your family scraped together a barley stew, roasted turnips, and a slightly tough piglet. In some villages, it was believed that spilling ale at a feast brought good luck, so you sidestepped the sticky puddles. Historians debate whether this was a superstition or just an excuse to get blackout drunk, but the scene around you suggests the latter. You clutch a wooden cup of watered-down ale. The field is a sea of faces, neighbors, cousins, strangers from the next village, all of them red-faced and loud. You spot your father arguing with the miller, still about that meadow, probably. The groom is somewhere in the chaos, but you haven't seen him yet, and you're not sure you want to. You're supposed to be a radiant bride, but you feel like a sheep being herded to market. If this is a feast, you'd hate to see their famine. A group of women with grease-stained aprons pulls you toward a rickety table. They cackle, offering you a hunk of bread and joking that you'll need your strength for tonight. You blush, wishing the ground would swallow you. You take a bite of the bread. It's dry and hard, and force a smile. The air smells of smoke, sweat, and roasting meat, and the fiddler is now competing with a drunken bagpiper. The noise is splitting your head. You find a moment to slip away to the edge of the crowd, leaning against a gnarled oak tree. From here, you can see the whole scene. Children chasing a stray dog, men arm wrestling over a barrel, women gossiping. This feast isn't just about you. It's a show of village unity. But it's also a reminder of how little privacy you have. You overhear a man betting a sack of oats on whether you'll do your duty tonight, and you grip your cup, ready to hurl it at him. Your mother spots you and waves you over. You're supposed to be mingling, playing the part of the blushing bride, but every step feels like wading through mud. Finally, you spot him across the field, surrounded by his brothers, a cup in his hand. He looks sturdy enough, but your heart doesn't flutter. It sinks. Someone shoves a piece of pork into your hands, and you eat it mechanically. The feast is a blur of noise and faces, and you're counting the hours until you can escape. But escape to where? The church ceremony is next, and after that, the bedding ritual? If the feast is this wild, the wedding night might be a riot. You stumble away from the feast, your stomach full of tough pork and sour ale. You're being herded toward the church. Your flower circlet is askew, your dress splattered with stew. The sun is setting and the air is growing cooler. Your mother grips your arm, leading you like a wayward goat. The wedding ceremony is about to begin, and you brace yourself for the priest's grim sermon. In medieval Europe, the church held marriage in an iron grip, especially by the 13th century, when it was declared a sacrament. The priest's role wasn't just to bless the union, it was to lecture you on your sacred duties in a tone that could curdle milk. You were expected to stand before the altar, head bowed, and promise obedience, chastity, and a lifetime of producing heirs. Some priests would sprinkle the bride's head with holy water to cleanse her of sinful thoughts. Good luck with that, given the jokes at the feast. The church looms ahead. You pause at the doorway, the air inside heavy with incense and damp stone. The priest, a gaunt man with a beard like a briar patch, peers at you as if he's seen too many failed weddings. Your mother shoves you forward, whispering at you not to look up. If you did, you might accidentally challenge both God and the groom. You shuffle toward the altar. The priest begins, his Latin a low drone, but you get the gist. Marriage is your duty, a sacred cage. He turns to the groom, who's standing a few feet away, smelling of flour and ale. You sneak a glance at him. His face is flushed, his tunic rumpled, but at least he hasn't run away. The priest's sermon shifts to warnings. No adultery, no disobedience, and definitely no skipping church services. If skipping church was a sin, half the village was doomed. You're handed a ring, a plain iron band, cold on your finger. It's not a symbol of love. It's a symbol of ownership, and the priest makes that clear. He's now preaching about the fall of Eve, how women must submit to avoid her fate. The church's rules are clear. Your body, your labor, your future, they all belong to your husband. The priest raises his voice and sprinkles you with holy water, cold of course. The ceremony drags on, your feet aching in the tight shoes, your head spinning from the incense. The groom mutters his vows, barely audible, and you whisper yours back. The priest's final warning is about the wedding night. It is your duty to perform the marital debt, a phrase that makes you queasy. If this is a debt, you'd rather owe the miller a sack of grain. The crowd cheers as the priest declares you man and wife, but you feel more trapped than triumphant. You step back outside, the evening air a relief. But the next trial is already looming, the bedding ceremony. You step out of the church, the priest's heavy words still ringing in your ears. The evening air is fresh, but there's no time for a reprieve. The drunken crowd from the feast swarms around you. Your new husband, still a stranger in flower, walks awkwardly beside you. Your mother adjusts your wilted circlet, but her eyes are already scanning the path to the miller's house. The bedding ceremony awaits, and the thought of it sends a chill down your spine. In medieval Europe, the bedding ceremony was a common tradition, especially among peasants. The couple was escorted to the marriage bed by family and neighbors. By the 14th century, this wasn't about romance. It was about witnessing the consummation of the marriage to validate the union. Your dowry, the meadow, the chickens, it all hinged on this. In some villages, the bedsheets were displayed the next morning to prove the bride's virginity, a custom as invasive as it sounds. Historians debate its prevalence, but right now, you're just praying your village isn't one of them. You're led down the path, the ground uneven, your shoes pinching. Torches flicker, and the air smells of pitch and spilled ale. The groom's mother, a stout woman with a voice like a crow, leads the procession. She eyes you up and down, as if assessing whether you're worth the bushel of barley her family demanded. Your mother whispers last-minute advice, lie still and pray. But her words are lost in a bawdy song the men have started singing. You blush, wishing you could flee. If this is a song about a plow, you're ready to plant yourself in another village. The miller's house looms ahead, its thatched roof sagging like a weary eyebrow. The crowd presses closer. You glance at your husband. He's staring straight ahead, his jaw tight. You wonder if he's as nervous as you are. No one asked what either of you wanted. This ceremony is for the village, not for you. You enter the house, dim and smoky, with a low ceiling. The marriage bed, just a straw mattress on a creaky frame, sits in the corner. The crowd tumbles in after you, ignoring any semblance of privacy. The groom's brothers are making jokes, one of them brandishing a jug of ale like a trophy. You want to scream, but you force a smile. The women start chanting something about fertility. The rules of the ceremony are unspoken but clear. You and the groom are to get into bed in front of the crowd. Your mother-in-law shoves a cup of spiced wine into your hand, saying it will help things along. You take a sip, the cloves sharp on your tongue, and try to ignore the shouts from the back to get on with it. If this is the main event, you'd rather skip to the epilogue. As you stand frozen, the bed looms like a stage, and the village is waiting for you to perform. You're standing in the miller's house. The smoky air feels like a heavy cloak, and the bedding ceremony is in full swing. The straw mattress in the corner looks no more inviting than a pile of damp hay. Your husband is beside you, smelling of ale, and the room is packed with villagers. This is the bedchamber, and it is anything but romantic. In medieval Europe, the bedchamber on a wedding night was less a private sanctuary and more a public checkpoint, especially for peasants whose unions sealed alliances. By the 14th century, the bedding ceremony often included witnesses to ensure the marriage was valid and couldn't be annulled. Some bedchambers were strewn with herbs like lavender to encourage the couple, though the stench of unwashed villagers likely overpowered any floral notes. You take a tentative step toward the bed. The crowd's noise swells. Your mother-in-law is barking orders, but no one is listening. Your mother stands by the door, her face a mixture of anxiety and resignation. You see your sister's wide eyes, taking in the chaos. You catch your husband's eye, hoping for a flicker of solidarity, but he's staring at the floor, his fists clenched. He's as powerless as you are, and in a strange way, that's a comfort. Your mother-in-law grabs your arm, pulling you toward the bed and handing you a linen shift for the night ahead. You clutch it, dreading the moment you'll have to change in front of this mob. The crowd is now chanting a mix of prayers and lewd suggestions. If this is a prayer, God must be covering his ears. The straw rustles as your husband sits on the bed. The crowd cheers as if he's just slain a dragon. You're supposed to follow him, but your feet feel rooted to the floor. The room is getting hot from the torches and the bodies. Your mother-in-law urges you on, and you realize there's no escape. The bedchamber isn't a sanctuary. It's a checkpoint, and the village won't leave until it's satisfied. If this is a honeymoon, you're ready for a very long sleep. You take a deep breath, step toward the bed, and brace yourself for whatever this medieval circus has in store. You're on the straw mattress, which creaks under your husband's weight. The crowd is packed tighter than a sack of grain, and the air is thick with ale fumes. In some communities, there was a specific bedding song, a rowdy tune meant to encourage the couple. You wince as the crowd launches into a garbled version about plowing fields and sowing seeds. Historians debate whether these songs were meant to bless the union or just embarrass everyone involved, but you're betting on the latter. As the lyrics get filthier, you force yourself to move. Your mother-in-law is watching with a disapproving glower, her arms crossed. You catch your husband's eye. He looks like he'd rather be anywhere else, which is oddly reassuring. You are both pawns in the village's game. The women in the room, your mother, the groom's aunts, a few curious neighbors, start fussing, urging you to change. You glance around the bedchamber and realize there is no private corner. You're expected to undress here, in front of everyone. Your mother steps forward, offering a slight screen as you pull your dress over your head. The wool snags in your hair. The shift is cold and thin enough that you feel exposed. You cross your arms, wishing you could disappear. The crowd's cheers intensify as you emerge, and someone shouts about a bonny bride. You want to snap back, but instead, you focus on the bed, where your husband is now lying, boots still on, with the look of a man waiting to have a tooth pulled. You climb onto the mattress, the straw rustling loudly, and slip under the blanket. Your heart is pounding. Your husband shifts, his elbow brushing yours, and you both freeze. The presence of the crowd turns every movement into a performance. If this is a play, you're ready for the curtain to fall. The bedchamber is now as hot as a furnace. You lie there, staring at the blackened ceiling beams as the crowd's chanting fades into a drunken hum. This is the moment the villagers have been waiting for, the proof that their union is sealed. You're not thinking about love or duty, just trying to survive the scrutiny. The bedding ceremony is almost over, but the night is far from done. You're lying on the straw mattress. The scratchy blanket scrapes your skin. The bedchamber is still packed, though the boisterous singing has finally died down. The torches cast a dim glow. Your husband is beside you, his breathing uneven, and you are both stiff as boards, acutely aware of the villagers who have lingered like unwelcome ghosts. In medieval Europe, privacy was a luxury, especially during weddings where the community's stake in the marriage meant everyone felt entitled to stay. By the 14th century, the bedding ceremony often dragged on, with some villagers remaining to ensure the couple didn't shirk their duty. In some regions, the newlyweds were given a posset, a spiced drink to ease the tension. You look at the empty cup from the wine and wish you could ask for another. You shift slightly, and the straw rustles loudly. Your husband mutters something under his breath, a curse or a prayer. You are both trapped in this bed. The crowd's presence is more oppressive than the priest's vows. Your mother is by the door, trying to reason with a few drunkards who have started an argument over a lost bet, but even she hasn't left. If privacy is a sin, this village is saintly. The walls of the bedchamber feel like they're closing in. You spot your sister's silhouette, still perched on that barrel, memorizing every awkward moment for future gossip. Your mother-in-law is fussing, pretending to tidy up, but really just hovering, casting glances at the bed. A man in the corner, some cousin of the groom, raises a new toast, sloshing ale and shouting about heirs for the mill. The crowd laughs and your face burns. If this is the environment for making heirs, they'd better clear the room first. Finally, your mother-in-law starts shooing the crowd out, but her tone is half-hearted, and only a few stumble into the night. The room is still too crowded, the air too warm, and you're counting the moments until you can at least pretend to be asleep. You glance at your husband, his face half hidden in shadow, and wonder what he's thinking. Does he hate this as much as you do? If privacy is a treasure, you're the poorest bride in the village. As you lie still, the straw digging into your back, you wait for the crowd to thin, knowing the real trials of the night are yet to come. The crowd has finally thinned. Your mother-in-law has herded the last of the drunkards out. The torches are burning low, casting long shadows. Your husband is beside you, silent and tense. The chaos of the ceremony is fading, and now you're left with him, the stranger groom, without a crowd chanting about plows and heirs. You're alone mostly, and the sudden quiet makes your heart pound faster than the crowd's bawdy songs. In medieval Europe, marriages were often arranged, and meeting your spouse for the first time on your wedding day wasn't uncommon, especially for peasants. By the 14th century, the church required mutual consent, but consent was a vague concept when a family's survival hinged on the match. You finger the iron ring. Staring at your husband's blank expression, you know that tenderness is a fantasy. You sneak a look at him. He's handsome enough, you suppose. Broad shoulders, a stubborn chin, and eyes that won't meet yours. He is the miller's son you've only ever seen in passing, always dusted with flour like a ghost from the mill. Now, in this dim light, he's a mystery you're supposed to share a life with. If he's this silent now, you wonder if you've married a sack of flour. The room is quiet, but your mother is still lingering by the door, pretending to fuss with a basket of bread. Your mother-in-law is snoring in the corner, her watchfulness defeated by ale. You're not quite alone, but it's close enough that you're acutely aware of every creak, every breath. You clear your throat, thinking you should say something, but what? Nice wedding? Sorry about that song? Your husband shifts, his elbow brushing yours again, and you both freeze like two cats caught in the granary. The silence is louder than any crowd. He's maybe 20, works at the mill, drinks too much at feasts. The village gossip is clear. But is he kind? Cruel? Does he want you? Or is he just following his father's orders, the way you followed yours? If marriage is a debt, you'd rather negotiate with a moneylender than this stranger. He's staring at the ceiling, his jaw clenched. The bedchamber is cold now, the torches almost out. You're supposed to start a life together, but you're like two strangers washed up on the same shore. A dog barks in the distance, and you jump. Your husband finally speaks, his voice low. This is a lot. You nod, surprised by his honesty, and for the first time, you feel a flicker of connection. If a lot is the summary of this marriage, you're off to a poetic start. You're still lying on the straw mattress. The cold of the bedchamber seeps through the thin blanket. Your husband's words, "This is a lot," hang in the air, a small bridge between you. The torches are out, and the room is quiet enough to hear an owl hoot. Your mother has left. Your mother-in-law's snores have subsided. For the first time, you are truly alone. But the weight of the day makes you question your role. You're not just a bride, you're a cog in a machine. In medieval Europe, consent to marriage was a murky concept. By the 13th century, the church insisted both parties agree to the union at the altar, but consent often meant a nod under family pressure. Your choice was not about desire, it was about survival. To say no was to risk becoming a burden or worse, an outcast. Some brides tried to delay consummation by feigning illness, a loophole to buy time, though it rarely worked. You turn to look at your husband. His face is in shadow, his eyes still on the ceiling, but his earlier words have made you brave. You're supposed to be his wife, but what does that mean when you barely know him? You remember the priest's sermon about submission and feel a spark of defiance. Did you choose this, or was it chosen for you? Your family needed the alliance, the village needed the spectacle. What about you? You clear your throat, breaking the silence. Did you want this, you ask, your voice barely a whisper. He tenses, and for a moment, You regret speaking. If silence is the answer, you've married a monk. He turns his head slightly, his eyes meeting yours for the first time. "It wasn't my choice either," he mutters, his voice rough but not unkind. It's not a sonnet, but it's honest, and it chips away at the wall between you. You realize he is as much a pawn as you are, caught in the same web of family and village expectations. The bedchamber air is cold and stale, but the brief exchange is a lifeline. You remember the gossip at the well, the way the village painted him as a bad-tempered drunk, and you wonder how much of it is true. Maybe he thinks the same of you. If consent were a choice, you would have chosen to be asleep. The mattress dips as your husband turns away, leaving you to stare at the blackened beams. You're not sure what you expected, some grand rebellion. But the reality is this: you're here, you're married, and there is no way out. If you'd faked a cough, the crowd would have probably prayed over you instead of leaving. You lie still. The owls hoot the only sound and wrestle with the truth. You're in this marriage, by choice or not, and the night has just begun. You're still on the straw mattress, the bedchamber's chill wrapping around you like a damp cloak. Your husband has turned away, his back a silent wall. The only sound is the faint crackle of a dying ember in the hearth. The bedding ceremony is over, but its weight remains. Now you face a new pressure: fertility. The village, the church, your own family. They all expect you to produce heirs. You're not just a wife. You are a vessel for the miller's line, and the expectation rests on your ribs like a stone. In medieval Europe, procreation was the primary purpose of marriage, especially for peasants whose heirs meant more hands for labor and the continuation of the family name. By the 14th century, the church hammered this home, framing fertility as a sacred duty, with childlessness often blamed on the wife's sin or weakness. In some villages, it was believed that a red ribbon tied around a bride's waist would enhance fertility. You're pretty sure your mother slipped one under your dress. You stare at the blackened ceiling beams. Your husband's breathing is steady, but you are wide awake, your thoughts racing. The priest's sermon about the marital debt wasn't just about intimacy. It was about children, and lots of them. You've heard the village gossip. Women who can't conceive are whispered about, pitied, or worse, shunned. You remember the feast, the women joking about needing your strength for tonight, and you realize they weren't just jesting. They were assessing your womb. If children are the goal, you'd rather be in charge of the village goats. You look at your husband's back. He is part of this too, but the burden feels unequal. If you don't produce an heir, it will be your failure, not his. You've seen it happen. A neighbor, barren after years, left to scrub floors while her husband took a lover. The church might frown, but the village looked the other way if it meant a son for the family. Your mother's voice echoes in your head, her desperate advice to lie still now taking on a sinister meaning. She wasn't preparing you for love. She was preparing you for survival. You think of the risks of childbirth, a deadly gamble in these times. Half the women you knew had lost sisters or cousins to it. You'd helped your mother attend a neighbor's labor, seen the blood and the screams, and the memory makes you shudder. Yet the village expects you to run toward that danger, and soon. If fertility is a blessing, it's one that comes with a curse no one talks about. You wonder if your husband is thinking about this, or if he's just glad the crowd is gone. You roll onto your side, facing his back, and trace the iron ring on your finger. It is a symbol of the vows that bind you, but also of the heirs you're expected to bear. If heirs are currency, you're the mint, and the village is cashing in. You lie there, the straw mattress a reminder of the hard life ahead, trying to quiet your mind. You're still on the straw mattress. The darkness of the bedchamber wraps around you more tightly than the scratchy blanket. Your husband has turned away, his even breathing a quiet wall, and the owl outside has fallen silent. Now your thoughts are consumed by something else, the strange rituals and superstitions surrounding this wedding night. Your mother's red ribbon was just the beginning. The village is steeped in bizarre charms and old wives' tales, all meant to ensure good fortune, love, or at least a baby by the next harvest. In medieval Europe, wedding nights were tangled in superstition. Communities clung to rituals to ward off bad luck or barrenness in a world where both felt like divine punishment. By the 14th century, these customs varied wildly. In some regions, brides were given a fertility posy, a bundle of herbs like fennel or rue placed in the bed to warm the womb. Your mother-in-law shoved one under the mattress, and you're sure it's why the straw smells like licorice. You turn onto your back, the straw digging into your skin. The ribbon, the posy, even the holy water the priest sprinkled. It's all part of the village's obsession with controlling this night. You remember at the feast, a neighbor threw salt over her shoulder as you walked by, muttering about warding off spirits. You laughed then, but now, in the dark, it doesn't seem so funny. What if the charms don't work? And what if they do, and you're faced with the dangers of childbirth? If salt wards off spirits, this marriage is going to need a whole barrel. Your husband shifts and you freeze, hoping he's not awake. You recall your mother's whisper before the bedding ceremony. Don't get in on the left side of the bed, or you'll curse the marriage. You'd scoffed, but you still climbed in from the right, just in case. The village believes in these things. Breadcrumbs under the bed for prosperity. A sprig of rosemary for faithfulness. You're torn between wanting to roll your eyes and a primal fear of their power. The church condemns some of these practices as pagan, but the priest didn't blink when your mother-in-law lit a candle to guide the angels. If angels need candles, they must have terrible eyesight. The mattress dips as your husband rolls onto his back. His arm brushes yours, and you hold your breath. He's asleep, thankfully. You're alone with your thoughts again, and they return to the posy under the bed. What if it's not just herbs? What if it's some kind of old magic, binding you even tighter to this life you didn't choose? If charms guarantee good luck, you'd trade them all for one night free of expectations. You lie still, the faint smell of licorice in the air, trying to shake the feeling that the village's superstitions are watching you as closely as its people. You're still on the straw mattress, the bedchamber dark and thick. The scratchy blanket offers little warmth. Your husband's quiet snores are the only sound. The superstitions of fertility posies and red ribbons still spin in your head, but now your thoughts turn to the larger power behind this marriage, the church. Its rules, stricter than any village charm, have dictated every step of this day. You realize this night isn't just about you, your husband, or the village. It's about the church's iron grip on your soul and your vows. In medieval Europe, the Catholic Church had, by the 13th century, established marriage as a sacrament, making it a sacred, unbreakable union under the watchful eye of God. Your wedding was not just a deal between families, it was a contract with divine stakes. In some households, it was required to hang a crucifix above the marriage bed to sanctify the act. You're pretty sure your mother-in-law nailed one up somewhere in this room. The church's rules are why you're here, in this bed with a stranger. The priest's voice echoes in your head, his warnings about the marital debt and procreating, all framed as your duty to God. If God is watching this marriage, he's probably as confused as you are. The bedchamber is cold, and you're left with the memory of the church's stone walls and choking incense. The priest made it clear, your vows are eternal, and to break them through adultery, disobedience, or barrenness is to risk your soul. You've heard stories of women being excommunicated, cast out for failing in their role. You turn on your side, facing your husband's dark shape. His snores are uninterrupted. The church demands not just heirs, but obedience, especially from you. The priest's sermon on the sin of Eve was not subtle. Woman is the weaker vessel, designed for submission. You clench your fist, the iron ring digging into your skin, and feel a spark of defiance. You did not choose this, but the church says it is your path to salvation. If submission is saintly, you'd rather be a sinner with a day off. The mattress dips as your husband mutters in his sleep. The silence allows your thoughts to drift back to the church's role in your life. The Sunday masses, the confessions, the sermons that always seemed aimed at women. This marriage is your new altar, and you are expected to kneel. If marriage is a sacrament, it's one that comes with a lifetime of penance. You lie there, the straw digging into your back, trying to reconcile the demands of the church with the uncertainty of the night ahead. You're still on the straw mattress, the bedchamber dark and cold. The scratchy blanket does little to ward off the chill. Your husband's snores have quieted. Now, as the night wears on, you confront a new reality, the role of the medieval wife. The priest's words, the villager's stares, even that fertility posy under the bed, it has all led you to this moment where you are no longer just a daughter but a woman expected to run a household, obey your husband, and uphold a web of gender roles tighter than the iron ring on your finger. In medieval Europe, gender roles in marriage were rigid. By the 14th century, a wife was expected to manage the home, raise the children, and support her husband's work, all while remaining submissive under church and community law. In some households, wives wore a châtelaine, a belt with keys and tools, as a sign of their domestic authority. Your mother has one, and you dread the day you inherit its jangling arsenal. You stare into the darkness. The church's rules, Eve's sin, submission, heirs, have already set the stage, but the village's expectations are just as heavy. You are expected to cook, clean, spin wool, keep the fire going, and ensure your husband is fed and the grain from the mill keeps flowing. If being a wife is a job, you'd like to negotiate for weekends off. Your husband is the head of this new home, or so the priest says, but you will be the one to keep it running. You've seen your mother barter with merchants, mend clothes, and chase chickens while your father drank at the tavern. The village may call him the master, but she is the backbone. And now that is your role. You are barely 17, and the thought of spinning enough wool for a family or worse, bargaining with your father-in-law, makes your head spin faster than a spindle. The bedchamber's silence is broken by a distant creak. You think of the women in the village, their hands calloused from work, their faces lined with worry. This is your future, and it's not very inspiring. The church says your place is to serve, but you've seen how wives quietly steer their husbands. Perhaps there is a kind of power in this role hidden beneath the drudgery. If submission means you run everything, you're about to be the shrewdest queen in the village. You turn on your side, trying to picture this new life. The miller's house will be your domain. Its smoky hearth, its drafts, its endless chores. You will be judged on how well you keep it, how quickly you produce heirs, how smoothly you fit into the village's rhythm. If marriage is a dance, you're both stumbling through the steps. You lie there, the weight of wifehood settling over you, bracing for the morning when the role becomes real. You're still on the straw mattress. The bedchamber's cold seeps through your thin shift. You've confronted the night's ultimate challenge, the awkward dance of intimacy. The church's rules, the fertility posy, the crowd's lewd songs. It has all been building to this moment when you must seal the marriage with a stranger. Your heart is pounding, and the silence feels like a held breath. In medieval Europe, consummation was the cornerstone of a valid marriage. By the 14th century, the church viewed the marital debt as a mutual obligation, but the pressure fell mostly on women, whose value was tied to fertility. Some couples were given a spiced drink to warm the blood. Your mother-in-law's posset was likely intended for this, though it made you feel more nauseous than passionate. You look at your husband's dark shape. He's still asleep, one arm thrown across the blanket. You are supposed to... What? Wake him? Wait? The priest's sermon about duty looms, but the reality feels like a chasm. You've heard the whispers of the older women, the vague hints about lying still or enduring, but no one told you how to act with a man you've barely spoken to. If this is a field, you are not ready to be plowed. You try to steady your breathing. Your husband stirs, his snores catching, and you freeze, hoping he stays asleep. Intimacy is supposed to bind you together, but it feels like an exam you haven't studied for. Your husband rolls onto his back, his eyes half open, glinting in the faint moonlight, filtering through a crack in the shutters. He mutters something, maybe your name, and you tense up. "You're awake?" he asks, his voice thick with sleep. You nod, then realize he can't see you, and whisper, "Yes." The silence stretches, as awkward as a misstep in a dance. You both know what's supposed to happen, but neither of you moves. If this is a dance, you're both waiting for the music to start. He shifts closer, his hand brushing yours, and you flinch, not from fear, but from the sheer uncertainty of it all. He pauses, sensing it, and for a moment you're grateful that he doesn't press. The church says it is your duty, but it's hard to feel anything but vulnerable. You are not ready, and maybe he isn't either. He clears his throat and says, "We don't have to, not tonight." It's a small mercy, and you exhale, the tension easing slightly. If debts are obligations, you're both filing for bankruptcy. You lie there, the awkwardness of the night shifting into something almost bearable. You're still on the straw mattress. Your husband's words, "We don't have to, not tonight," hang in the air like a rare kindness. His snores have resumed, soft and even. The night has grown calmer, but you're not asleep. Your thoughts shifting from the pressures of the bedchamber to the village outside. Even now you can feel their eyes. You're not just a wife, you're their story, and they are waiting to see how it unfolds. In medieval Europe, villages were tight-knit, and a new bride's life was public property. By the 14th century, community scrutiny didn't end at the wedding. Neighbors watched for signs of success: heirs, harmony or failure, barrenness, discord. In some villages, a bed watcher, an older woman, was appointed to check on the newlyweds the next morning. You pray your mother-in-law isn't that dedicated, but her behavior last night doesn't bode well. You imagine them now, in the tavern or their smoky huts, making bets on whether you'll do your duty or falter. You remember the women at the well, whispering about the miller's son's character, and you wonder what they're saying about you. Are you the lucky one, or the one who will stumble? If gossip is currency, the village is richer than a king. You're not new to their scrutiny. You've lived under it your whole life. But now, as a wife, the stakes are higher. They will watch your belly, the tidiness of your home, any crack in your marriage. You think of your mother, how she deflects their stares with a sharp tongue. And you wonder if you'll ever have such armor. Your husband's small mercy makes you wonder if he feels the villagers' eyes too. He is the miller's son, after all, expected to uphold the family name. You picture the men at the feast clapping him on the back, their toasts about heirs for the mill. He is as much their puppet as you are. If the village is a stage, you are both performing without a script. You're already dreading the morning when you'll have to emerge from this house and face the villagers' questions, subtle and not so subtle, about how the night went. Will they inspect the sheets, like in the horror stories? Will your mother-in-law smirk or frown? The thought makes you want to stay in this uncomfortable bed forever. If scrutiny is a sport, the village deserves a crown for its prying. You brace for the morning, knowing the community's watchful eyes are already sharp, ready to judge your first steps as a wife. A faint gray light is seeping through the shutters. The crow of a rooster now mingles with the sounds of the waking village, the creak of a cart, the bark of a dog. Your husband is awake, rubbing his face. The morning trial you've been dreading, the villagers' scrutiny, is upon you. But now you face a new reality: domestic duty. You are no longer just a bride. You are the mistress of the miller's house, and the endless tasks of a medieval wife are about to hit you like a bucket of cold water. In medieval Europe, a wife's role was the bedrock of the household. By the 14th century, a new bride was expected to begin her duties immediately, proving her worth to her husband's family and the village. In some communities, a bride was gifted a hearth charm, like a carved wooden spoon, to bring luck to her chores. Your mother-in-law left one on the hearth, and you already fear its symbolic weight. You sit up, the blanket sliding off. The bedchamber is cold, the air smelling of last night's torch smoke. You can hear your mother-in-law moving about outside the door. She's probably waiting for you to build the fire, knead the dough, or at least look like you know what you're doing. You realize this is the moment your mother was preparing you for, not the wedding night. If housekeeping is an art, you're still drawing stick figures. Your husband is pulling on his boots, silent but not as tense as last night. You wonder if he expects you to leap up and start making porridge like the perfect wife from the priest's sermon. This is your hearth now, your responsibility, and the miller's family will judge you on how well you keep it. You stand, the icy floorboards chilling your feet. The bedchamber is a mess. Cups from last night's ceremony, a wilted flower from your circlet. You feel an urge to tidy, if only to postpone facing the outside world. If domestic chores are a stage, you're performing for the most curious audience in Christendom. Your husband clears his throat, looking at you. Need help with the fire? His voice is rough, but not unkind. It's a small gesture, and a surprising one given the church's lectures on his authority. You shake your head, muttering that you can manage, though you're not sure you can. If a clean home is salvation, you're praying for a miracle. You step toward the hearth, the wooden spoon looming like a scepter, ready for the day's labors. You're standing at the miller's hearth. Your husband has left, muttering something about the mill, leaving you alone with the crackling fire and the weight of your pregnancy fears. The risks of childbirth still knot your stomach. But now, as you hear your mother-in-law's approaching footsteps, you face another reality, your husband's authority. The church says he is the head of this house, and you must submit to his will, whether he is kind or cruel. In medieval Europe, a husband's authority was absolute. By the 14th century, the church's teachings on marriage position the man as the head and the woman as the heart, a poetic way of saying you had to obey without question. The door creaks open, and your mother-in-law enters, her apron already dusted with flour. "Weak fire," she comments, and you bite back a reply, knowing she is testing you. You realize she is judging not just your chores, but how well you will submit to her son. The husband's authority is her authority too, until you prove yourself. If he is the head, you're hoping for a very light rain. You wonder what kind of husband he will be. The village gossip about his temper nags at you, but his mercy last night offers a glimmer of hope. Still, the church's rules are clear. He is your master, and defiance could be met with a beating, or worse, shame for your family. You've seen wives with bruises on their arms, their eyes downcast. Your mother-in-law is still hovering, muttering about the bread you should have started. You nod, grabbing the sack of coarse flour, from your husband's mill probably, and begin to measure. His authority extends even here. If the bread is bad, it's your fault, but he will be blamed for a poorly run home. You think of the dowry, the church vows, the villagers' stares. All of it props up his power over you. But last night, he seemed as cornered as you were. If he is a king, you're both stuck in the same pot. The fire catches, its heat warming your face, but the bedchamber feels smaller. You hear a shout from outside and flinch, expecting him to burst in with orders. The church says you are one flesh, but only he has a voice. You knead the dough, your hand sinking into its stickiness, and try to imagine a life where his authority doesn't feel like a yoke. If obedience is a virtue, you're about to be the least virtuous wife in the village. You focus on the bread, the wooden spoon, your only ally, your kneading dough at the hearth. The smoky warmth of the bedchamber is a scant shield against the morning chill. Your mother-in-law has left, her reprimand about the bread still stinging. But now, as the village hums outside, your thoughts turn to the women who have gone through this before you. Their advice is a lifeline you desperately want to grasp. Seasoned wives were a bride's best resource, passing down practical and emotional wisdom in a world where marriage was a high-stakes transaction. By the 14th century, women shared knowledge through informal networks, from gossip at the well to chats at the market. Some women gave brides not charms, pouches of herbs or threads as a symbol of sisterhood. Your mother slipped one into your hand yesterday, and it's tucked inside your shift now, smelling of thyme. The dough is sticky under your fingers. You remember the feast, the knowing looks from the women, their words full of advice. Keep the hearth hot, but don't burn the stew, or smile at him even when he's wrong. Your mother's voice was the loudest, her warning to bend like a reed before your husband's authority. She has navigated your father's moods for years, and you're starting to see her strength in a new light. If bending is a skill, your mother is the village champion. You think of your neighbor Agnes, a wiry woman with a cackle like a crow. Don't argue in public, she told you, but whisper your mind in private. Her husband is a drunk, but she keeps their hut immaculate, their children fed. Her advice feels like a map, but you're not sure you can follow it. You work more flour into the dough, your hands growing confident. You think of the bride's knot in your shift. The time is a reminder of the women rooting for you. Agnes had also warned you about village gossip. You're beginning to understand the balance. Take their wisdom, but guard your heart. If advice is a stew, you're drowning in everyone else's secret ingredients. You shape the loaf, your hands finding a rhythm, and feel a flicker of confidence. Your husband is still at the mill, his authority a shadow you have yet to fully confront. But the women's advice gives you a spark of agency. It shows you how to carve out a space for yourself within this role. You set the loaf by the fire to rise. If surviving marriage is a craft, you're apprenticing with the best. You wipe your hands on your shift, the scent of time lingering, and brace for the day, knowing the wisdom of the village women is your quiet armor. You're still at the hearth. The smoky warmth of the bedchamber mingles with the smell of rising dough. Your husband had stopped in briefly. His gruff smells good about the bread, leaving a spark of hope for a slow-growing love. But now, as the morning light fills the shutters, you're wrestling with a grim truth. Annulment, an escape from this marriage, is a near impossible dream. In medieval Europe, annulment was a rare and thorny path, especially for peasants. By the 14th century, the Church only granted it for specific reasons: non-consummation, fraud, or a prior vow. The process was expensive, complicated, and left women trapped. Some desperate brides claimed witchcraft to dissolve a marriage, but priests rarely believed it. Your husband's mercy last night saved you from the marital debt, but it also means the marriage is not fully sealed, a technicality that could, in theory, open a door to annulment. But you know it would be a scandal, shaming both families. You'd be the girl who failed, a burden on your parents. If annulment is a key, it's locked in a chest you can never open. You punch down the loaf one last time. The Church's rules are ironclad. Once you've said yes, you're bound for life. You've heard whispers of noblewomen buying annulments with gold, but for you, a peasant with a few chickens, it's a fantasy. Your mother's advice to bend like a reed was preparing you for a life with no exit. Even if your husband proves cruel, the village and the Church will urge you to endure, not escape. If annulment is a road, it's blocked by the entire village holding pitchforks. Your husband's mercy was a kindness, but it was also a risk. If word gets out, the village will gossip, the priest might inquire, and your mother-in-law will never forgive you. You place the loaf in the embers, the heat stinging your fingers. You feel the weight of a life that can't be undone. If marriage is a cage, you're learning to decorate it, not break it. You watch the bread bake, bracing for the day, knowing annulment is a dream you can't afford. You're still at the hearth, the smoky warmth of the bedchamber alive as your bread bakes. The grim reality of no annulment sits like a heavy stone. But now, as the morning light fills the shutters, you turn to faith. Religion, the iron grip of the church that has shaped your vows and fears, is also your anchor, a way to endure this marriage. In medieval Europe, faith was the pulse of daily life. By the 14th century, the Catholic Church was not just a spiritual guide, but a coping mechanism. Some wives carried a prayer cord, a string of beads to count prayers for harmony in the home. You look at the baking bread and find yourself desperate for whatever comfort faith can offer. You whisper a half-forgotten prayer for strength. You've seen women lean on faith. Your mother kneeling at the village cross after a bad harvest, or Agnes muttering psalms while scrubbing pots. If prayers can mend marriages, you'll be praying until the next harvest. The church's promise is to endure, to submit, and God will reward you. Maybe not in this life, but the next. It's a thin comfort when the village wants heirs and your bread is being tested. But it's something. You pull the loaf from the embers, its crust crisp and warm. You set it on the hearth and feel a flicker of pride. Your faith has seen you through this task at least. You've prayed for your family, for rain, for sick cows, but now you're praying for yourself, for courage, for a spark of love, for survival. If God is listening, He's got a long list from this village. Your husband's boots crunch outside. Faith says to trust in God's plan, but it's hard when that plan involves a stranger and a village of gossips. If faith moves mountains, you're hoping for at least a couple of hills in this marriage. You wrap the loaf in a cloth, leaning on the quiet strength of prayer. You're still at the hearth, the smoky warmth of the bedchamber fading with the fire. The golden loaf cools on a cloth beside the carved wooden spoon. Now, as the morning's noises swell, your thoughts turn to folklore, the strange tales and superstitions that fill the gaps where faith and duty fall silent. In medieval Europe, folklore was a living thread, weaving magic and meaning into daily life. By the 14th century, stories of fairies, spirits, and charms were as real as the harvest. In some villages, it was believed a bride should sleep with a hazel twig under her pillow to dream of her husband's true heart. Your mother had pressed one into your hand at the feast, and it's probably lost in the chaos of the bedding. You remember the bedding ceremony, the bawdy songs hinting at spirits blessing or cursing the bed. Your neighbor Agnes once told you a story of a bride who forgot to leave out milk for the good folk and awoke to a soured marriage. You'd scoffed then, but now, in the quiet of the bedchamber, you feel an urge to check the corners for unseen eyes. If fairies can ruin marriages, they're worse than village gossips. The tales feel alive, their magic a counterpoint to the stern prayers of the church. You think of the hazel twig, the fertility posy, the red ribbon, all blending faith and folklore. Your mother's voice echoes, her warning to honor the old ways alongside your prayers. She was hedging her bets, trusting both God and the unseen. The village women's stories of brides who won love by tying knots in moonlight or lost it by spilling salt are like a map if only you could read it. You think of your husband's mercy last night and wonder if a folk tale could explain his kindness or foretell his future moods. The church calls love a duty, but folklore whispers it's a spell, fragile and fickle. If love is a charm, you're hoping for one that won't backfire. You think of the dowry, the vows, the villagers' stares, all threaded with folklore, spirits in the fields, omens in the stars. These stories aren't just fictions. They're a way to survive, to make sense of a marriage you didn't choose. You wonder if your husband heard the tale of the miller's wife who outsmarted a brownie and won a heart of gold. If folklore is true, you're ready to bargain with a pixie for a better deal. You step toward the door, carrying the village's tales as quiet armor against the unknown. You're standing at the bedchamber door, the dying hearth at your back. The golden loaf cools on a cloth. Now, as the morning's noises swell, you're wrestling with a heavier weight: legacy. This marriage isn't just about you or your husband. It's about continuing a bloodline, a burden that feels like carrying the village's future on your shoulders. In medieval Europe, legacy was the heart of a marriage, especially for peasants whose children ensured the family land and the miller's trade would endure. By the 14th century, producing heirs was a communal and sacred duty. In some families, a lineage cloth, an embroidered strip with ancestors' names, was hung over the hearth to remind the couple of their duty. Your mother-in-law has one, worn and faded, staring at you from the wall. You remember the bedding ceremony, the songs about heirs, and realize it wasn't just about children. It was about solidifying the miller's name, your family's honor, the village web. Your husband's mercy last night delayed this duty, leaving you both vulnerable to gossip. If legacy is a chain, you're already tangled in its links. Your mother's voice echoes. She spoke not just of bending like a reed, but of her own mother, who bore 7 children and buried 4, all to keep the family name alive. Legacy isn't just children, it's the stories, the land, the creak of the mill that you are now a part of. You think of your husband and wonder if he feels this weight. He is the miller's son, expected to carry on the trade, the home, the pride. The lineage cloth on the wall lists names you don't know. Each one is a ghost, expecting you not to fail. Your fear of childbirth still haunts you, but legacy adds another layer, tying your body to the village's history. If heirs are a story, you're writing it with a pen you didn't choose. You think of your husband's small kindnesses and wonder if legacy could be something that brings you together. The village women's tales hinted at a slow-sparking love, but legacy is a colder fire, one that burns for those not yet born. If legacy is a tapestry, you're weaving it with threads you cannot see. You stand at the hearth, knowing the village's hopes for your bloodline are as heavy as its stairs. You are standing at the bedchamber door, ready to face the day with the grim resolve of a survivor. This marriage is a harsh reality, and you are learning to adapt, to find your place in its unyielding rhythm. In medieval Europe, survival was the pulse of peasant life, especially for new wives. By the 14th century, women honed a practical and emotional resilience, navigating church rules, village gossip, and domestic duties. Some wives carried a survival knot, a cord tied with prayers or charms. Your mother's advice to bend like a reed came with one, and it's knotted in your shift now. You think of the bedding ceremony and realize survival isn't just about heirs or bread. It's about enduring scrutiny, fear, the weight of expectation. You've seen women like Agnes laugh through hardship, or your own mother bargain for the last turnip, and their strength is your blueprint. If survival is a game, you're learning the rules faster than a fox in a henhouse. You look at the bedchamber door where your mother-in-law's voice is audible. Her judgment looms, but you're starting to see it as a challenge, not a sentence. You think of your husband, his gruff kindness, and wonder if he is adapting too. Perhaps you are both learning to navigate this life one step at a time. You tighten the survival knot, a small act of defiance. If life is a storm, you're not building an ark, but you have a sturdy umbrella. You pick up the loaf, its weight solid in your hands, and feel a quiet pride. You baked the bread, you survived the night. These are small victories, stacking like stones in a wall. Your husband's boots crunch outside, and you brace for his return or for your mother-in-law's next demand. Survival means meeting them both, not with rebellion, but with the firm resolve you're finding within yourself. If survival is an art, you're painting with whatever colors you can find. You set down the loaf and step toward the door, ready to meet the day. You stand at the bedchamber door, the hearth's faint warmth behind you, the golden loaf resting on a cloth. Now, as the morning sun fills the shutters, you pause for a moment of reflection. This marriage has changed you, and you are finding your footing in this world. In medieval Europe, reflection was a rarity for peasants, but quiet moments offered a chance to make sense of it all. Some wives marked their first day as a wife with a hearth vow, a quiet promise to endure. Your loaf feels like such a vow. You look around the bedchamber, the loaf, the spoon, the rumpled bed. You see the past night as a tapestry woven with fear, duty, and a faint thread of hope. The women's advice, your husband's kindness. It has all led you to this threshold where you are not just surviving, but beginning to stand firmer. You place your hand on the rough wood of the door. The village is waiting outside, your mother-in-law's sharp tongue, the gossip at the well. But you are not the same girl who hauled water 2 days ago. You have passed through the bedding ceremony, managed the hearth, weathered the weight of legacy, and emerged stronger. You are not free, but you are learning to bend, to endure, and perhaps even to thrive. You push the door open, and the sounds of the village rush in. You step onto the threshold, the sun warming your face. This is your world now. You take a deep breath and step outside, ready to meet the day with a quiet resolve. Your husband is at the mill. The women are waiting, and the rhythm of the village pulls you forward. You carry your unspoken vow in your chest like an ember. This marriage, this life, it is yours, with all its thorns and its small mercies. You look back at the bedchamber, its hearth a symbol of your first victory, and you smile faintly. If survival is a song, you are humming the first verse. The village spreads before you, alive and unyielding, but you are ready to walk its paths,